let's do a little bit of review. And then we'll continue. So here we are in the Gemara. After some discussion, right? So that we had a discussion. We skipped most of the discussion of drashot, many of which are connected to man. And now we're back in the Gemara. It's on Ayin Vav Amud Aleph, and the Gemara resumes the discussion of the Mishnah with the words Asur Ba'achila. So the Mishnah tells us that Yom Kippurim is Asur Ba'achila, and the Gemara says Hani Chamisha Inuyin Keneged Mi. All right, so it's Asur Ba'achila, and as well as the other Inuyim, right? Achila, Shtiya, Rechitza, Sicha, Nilata Sanda, Tashmisha Mita. So the Gemara asks, these 5 afflictions, what are they in correspondence to? And as we'll see, what that means is, what psukim are they based on? Amar Rav Chisda keneged chamisha inuyim shebetorah. So they're in correspondence to the 5 inuyim that are mentioned in the Torah. And then it lists uve'esor, v'ach be'esor, Shabbat Shabbaton, v'Shabbat Shabbaton, v'haita lachem. Right, so these are all places where the Torah lists tzivuyim of inui. Just a second. And we've seen all of these before, and 1 second. I made a chart, I made a list of them, which you can see here. Right, so when the Gemara says right, when the Gemara says Ube'esor, so Ube'esor, that's referring to Parshat Achrei Mot. I'm sorry, Ube'esor Chodesh Hashvi is referring to Parshat Pinchas. Ach Be'esor is referring to Parshat Emor. Shabbat Shabbaton refers also to Parshat Emor. Shabbat Shabbaton refers to Achrei Mot. And V'haita lachem, also Achrei Mot. So the listing here is in reverse order of the way they appear in the Torah. In the listing that I made here, we have them in order, and we've touched on this before, that actually the Torah talks about Inui in regard to Yom Kippurim 6 times, not 5 times. But the 6th time, Yesh Lomar, is here in Parshat Emor. It says, Ki kol nefesh asher lo ti'uneh be'etzem hayom hazeh v'nichluta me'ameh. Any soul that does not afflict itself, or does not become afflicted. So that's not Lashon Tzivui, right? It's not in a command form, it's a descriptive form. And so apparently we don't learn out an Inui from that. In other words, we learn out Inuyim by virtue of the fact that the Torah commands us in 5 psukim, 5 different places, that we need to afflict our souls. So each one of them comes to tell me a different Inui. That seems to be how the Gemara is learning here. So, 1 sec. Yeah. Hani chamisha havu v'anan shita tanan. Right, so the Gemara actually asks this question. He says, these are 5, but we learn 6. In other words, Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah 6 Inuyim. So the Gemara answers Shtiya Bicha Chilahi. So what's the Gemara's question here?
Why do we have 6 pisukim that, and why do we have 5 pisukim but have 6 inuim? So we, it says that they correspond, but there doesn't seem to be a correspondence. And so
Right.
therefore, and so it's suggesting that Achila and Shtia actually count as one, which brings us down, gets us back to the magic number.
Okay, so right, so that's the Gemara's answer. So the question is, Hani Chamisha Havu, you're saying that there are 5 Inuyim. In other words, that was the original question of the Gemara. It says, these 5 Inuyim, what are they in correspondence to? And then we bring 5 Psukim to support the Chamisha Inuyim, to say that those are the sources for the 5 Inuyim. But it says, Hani Chamishahu v'anan shita tanan. These are 5, but we learned 6 in the Mishnah. So there should be 6 psukim, or, there's a mismatch. Either there should be 6 psukim, or there should only be 5 inuyim listed in the Mishnah. So as Michael just said, Shtiya Bicha Achilahi. So we learned that Shtiya is included in Achila. Meaning what? That when the Mishnah says Achila u'Shtiya, it's really what? It's really one inui. It's really one inui. Damar Reish Lakish minayin l'Shtiya shehi bicha Achila. As we see that Reish Lakish said, where do we learn that Shtiya is included in Achila? Shneamar v'yachaltu ifnei Hashem Elokecha, masar degancha tiroshcha v'yitzarecha. Right, so it's a slightly truncated verse. The verse goes, "Yachaltu ifnei Hashem Elokecha b'makom asher yivchar l'shaken shmo sham, masar degancha tiroshcha v'yitzarecha, uv'chorot bekarcha v'tzonecha, l'man tilmad lirat Hashem Elokecha kol hayamim." So what's the pasuk talking about? What's the context?
This was Maser Sheni, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so this is talking about Maser Sheni, and what's the din of Maser Sheni?
And then you take from the maser that you give to the Levites, you take a 10th out, and you basically appear you appear in the, well, I guess it'd be Jerusalem, but it could be wherever at that point. At that point, Jerusalem isn't established as the place. You appear whatever place God chooses, and you either bring food or you convert your food into money. You put your drink to money, and then you buy it there, and you eat and drink.
Okay,
Before
that's almost correct, but what it's not a tenth of what you gave to the Levi. A tenth of what you give to the Levi has to be mafresh a tenth. And what does he do with that?
He gives to the Kohen? He gives to the Kohen?
He gives it to the Kohen. That's Trumat Maaser.
okay.
So what's Maaser Sheni?
It's of the other grains, just 10% of the other grain.
Right. So if you have a crop, so the order is that first you'll take Truma and you give that to the Kohen. The Torah doesn't specify an amount, but it was considered to be acceptable to take 2%. And then you give that to the Kohen. Then from the remainder, you take 10%. That's Maaser Rishon. You give that to the Levi. The Levi takes from that and he gives to the Kohen, that's Trumat Maaser. And then, but you go back to your crop after you gave Maaser Rishon, you take 10% of what's left after you took Truma and Maaser Rishon, and that's in the Shemitah years, the first, second, fourth, and fifth year, you take Maaser Sheni, and then that food that you have separated out, you have to go and eat it in Yerushalayim. And if you can't eat it in Yerushalayim, where you just prefer not to schlep it all the way to Yerushalayim, you can redeem it for money. You take its value and redeem it for money and add 20%, you add a fifth. Then you take the money to Yerushalayim and you buy food and you eat it. You buy food in Jerusalem and you eat it in Jerusalem. So that's Maaser Sheni. What do we see from this pasuk that's relevant to our discussion here? Our discussion here is we want to show that achilah, that shtiyah is included in achilah, that when we say by Yom Kippur, one is not allowed to eat, it's the same isur to eat as it is to drink. Where do we see that? What's the proof from this pasuk about Maaser Sheni? Hang on. Here we go.
So among the items Abzibai is Tirosh, nachon?
I'm sorry, say that again.
So it lists different items that you can buy in Jerusalem, and among them, I believe, is Tirosh, or I don't remember exactly, but it's some drink or another.
Well, here, let's see what it says. V'yachalta lifnei Hashem Elokecha. This is Dvarim Yud Daled, Pasuk Chaf Gimel. Right? The pasuk right before this is the pasuk of Aser to Aser, right? So Aser to Aser, the drasha is that you have to take a tenth after you took a tenth. This is the introduction to Maaser Sheni. Et kol tvuat zarecha hayotze hasadeh shana shana. V'yachalta lifnei Hashem Elokecha b'makom asher yivchar l'sheken shmo sham ma'asar degancha tiroshcha v'yitzarecha. Right, so among the things that you have to eat, Lifnei Hashem Elokecha. Lifnei Hashem Elokecha in this context would mean in the presence of the Beit HaMikdash, meaning in Yerushalayim. So you have to you eat from the Maasar Dagan and Tirosh. So what is Tirosh?
Wine.
Presumably it's wine. We'll see, we're going to challenge that today, right? Because we have other proof texts. But Pashtut Inyan, the simple understanding is that this includes wine and yitzhar. Yitzhar would be oil. And you have to eat them. So how does this prove our case that shtiyah is bichlal achila?
Because there's a particular article of drink is listed with the foods. It's subsumed under the foods.
It's say better, not that it's subsumed under the foods, but what's the command here?
You shall eat.
You should eat, right? You have to eat. V'yachalta. So you eat, and one of the things that you're supposed to eat is tirosh. So it tells me that the verb of eating, the act of eating, includes drinking. let's go back. Mimai. So the Gemara challenges this and says, right? So the Gemara says first, it gives this explanation. Tirosh chamrahu. Tirosh is wine. The karile, the chalta, and I read about it that you eat it. So that proves to me that shtiya is bichlal achila. So the Gemara challenges it and says, Mimai, v'dilma da'achle al yedei anigron. Perhaps he ate it by way of anigron. So those of you who were here or listened last time, what's anigron?
It is a mixture of wine and garum.
Very good. Apparently it's a sauce of oil and garum, and they threw in wine. So in other words, it's some kind of a sauce that included wine. So what does that tell me? What's the question from Anigron?
So Anigron, I mean, one presumably does not drink a sauce. So it'd be something that one would eat with, would consume with food as part of food.
Okay, and so what's the problem for me? Why is the Gemara bringing it up here?
So the problem is that this suggests that, in some sense, this suggests that shtia may not be subsumed into achila, because tirosh may be an article of food rather than an article of drink.
Right, or at least in this context. In other words, when the Torah says v'achalta and it says tirosh, you should eat tirosh, maybe it means that you are eating the wine. You're eating the wine because it's now an ingredient in something that you eat. And
I mean,
maybe the tzivui of eating still only includes things that we consume by eating and not by drinking.
So this sounds a bit counterintuitive. Since, I mean, at a festive meal, I mean, fermented fish sauce does not a festive meal make. Maybe that's my own sort of cultural reference, but I would think that wine.
First of all, it's not necessary. I mean,
it's delicious, but it's but I think, I mean, I want a glass of wine. I would not necessarily want, fermented fish.
It doesn't matter. In other words, here's the point, though. First of all, this isn't necessarily a festive meal, just to point that out. In other words, this is simply a chiyuv. You have to eat Maaser Sheni in Yerushalayim. So maybe you'll eat it during the Chag, but maybe you'll come to Yerushalayim, you'll make a trip and just go to eat. That doesn't matter. Second of all, I don't think I think what you bring up is interesting, but not relevant. In other words, the only thing that's relevant here is, do I eat tirosh or do I drink tirosh? So I know that I drink wine. Nobody argues with the fact that we drink wine. That's not the point. You could still have your Maaser Sheni and drink wine. No one would prevent you from drinking wine. What's the point?
You could also eat it.
And therefore what?
Therefore, it's included in the category of achila.
Yeah, and if tirosh in this context is something that I eat, then what about my question about shtiya being included in achila? What does it tell me about shtiya and achila?
So shtiya may not be included in achila.
And if that's true, then what's my problem?
We're left with 6 categories of inuim, but only 5 but only 5 passages.
Okay, very good. Right, just to bring it all the way back. So that's my question. My question is, if maybe maybe the tirosh that's being referred to in this pasuk is tirosh that somebody ate by way of anigron. And Rashi explains, anigron min ma'achal shenotnin bo yain, is type of food that they would put wine into. V'kama mekomot shenina b'tosefta, anigron v'ach sigron shenotnin bo yain v'shemen. Right? These are two things, two kinds of sauces that included wine and oil. Dama Rabba bar Shmuel, anigron maya de silka. As Rabba bar Shmuel explained, anigron is maya de silka. It's water that had boiled spinach in it. And achsigron maya de kulhu shlaki. Achsigron is water of all other heavily boiled things. In other words, presumably heavily boiled vegetables, like Rashi says. To kulhu shlaki shal mine yarki. Other types of vegetables. Right? Shlika is to boil something heavily. And this was part of the food preparation. So, Ela Amar Rav Acha Bar Yaakov Mehacha. So it means that I don't have a proof from the pasuk of Maser Sheni that shtiya is included in Achilah. So rather, Rav Acha Bar Yaakov says, I learned it from here. V'natata kesef b'chol asher ta'aveh nafshecha babakar uvatzon uvayayin uvashechar. Okay, so that's continuing in the same parsha. Yeah. So the first pasuk that we referenced is here, pasuk Chaf Gimel, and right, it says that you should eat before Hashem in the place that He has chosen, etc. And then pasuk Chaf Dalet is if it's too far away from you and you can't carry all of the food that you have to eat, because you'll be far away, like Yerushalayim will be too far away. Then what do you do? Then you put it into silver. It literally means you wrap up the silver in your hand. But Chazal learn out from this v'tzarta hakesef that you have to take kesef with its surah. In other words, you can only redeem it on coins, not on plain silver. You have to redeem it on kesef that has its surah. And then what do you do? So in other words, Pasuk Chav Gimel is talking about the first order of Maaser Sheni, which is to take the actual food that you were mafrish, that you had separated out from your crops, and take that food to Yerushalayim to eat. Pasuk Kavav is talking about when you did pidyon, right? That when you redeemed it against money, then you take the kesef b'chol asher ta'aveh nafshecha babakar uvatzon uvayayin uvashechar ub'chol asher tishalcha nafshecha ve'achalta sham ifnei Hashem Elokecha v'samachta ata uveitecha. So you take all of those. You take the money, and then you go to Yerushalayim, and then you can use it to eat the following things. You can use it to eat meat of cows or of sheep, or you can eat wine or shechar, anything that your heart desires, anything that you want. So here, what do we see? Once again, the verb v'achalta refers specifically to the consumption of wine. Right? So that's what the Gemara says. El maravacha bar Yaakov mehacho natata kesef b'chol asher ta'aveh nafshecha b'bakar v'tzon v'yayin v'shechar shechar v'yayin shtiyahu. It should be shtiyahen. So shechar and yayin are both things that one drinks. B'kari rachmana v'achalta. And the Torah refers to them through eating, by way of eating. So what's the problem with this proof? But what was the problem with our first proof?
You could eat it's possible to eat the wine.
So what's the problem here?
You also presumably could eat the wine, although not so the shechar.
Well, here's the thing, right? So in other words, it's clear I'm going to be asking the same question, right? Because a moment ago I said that I can eat wine because I can eat it when it's the ingredient, it's something that I eat. So why not here also? So the Gemara says, Mimai, right? So for what? In other words, why do I think that this is a good proof? Maybe here also it's talking about wine that one consumes by way of anigron. So here the Gemara says shechar katav. Here it adds the word shechar that wasn't in the first pasuk. So what is shechar? Tell me. So shechar is also a liquid that I drink, but what's different about it? It's shechar implies midi de mishaker. It's something that makes you drunk. So how is that a stronger proof than simply saying wine? Saying shechar because shechar is something that makes you drunk.
One does not get drunk off of fermented fish sauce.
Right, so you don't get drunk from consuming an alcohol that's part of a food. You have to in order to get drunk from it, you have to drink it. So as Rashi explains, midi de mishaker, and Rashi says, ein shichrut derech achila. Right? There is no drunkenness by way of eating. So I think the example we mentioned last week is like eating rum cake, which might have a lot of alcohol in it, and even if you can still detect the alcohol in it, you're not going to be able to get drunk from it. The way you get drunk is by drinking. So far so good. So since this pasuk added the word shechar, right? So it has the word yayin, where it's explicitly wine, and earlier it's tirosh, and we'll come back to the word tirosh. But here it's talking about yayin and shechar. By the way, you'll notice if you look in the Gemara has just the word shechar. It says avanatata kesef b'chol asher ta'aveh nafshecha b'bakar v'tzon v'yayin v'shechar. That's the pasuk. And in the Gemara it says shechar shtiyahu. And I have in brackets here v'yayin. That's the brackets. That's added in by the Bach. He says shechar and yayin are things that you drink. It's not so important to get into the nitty-gritty of this, but I'm just pointing that out. If you look at the regular Gemara, this v'yayin is a note on the side of the Hagot Bach.
By the way, because we're doing this class online and because I couldn't resist checking, I did just check, and according to Wikipedia, one can get drunk off of a rum cake.
Well, maybe that wasn't a good. That's not a good example. However, what we'll see is that the Gemara itself is going to disprove its theory. The assumption here in the Gemara is that you don't get drunk off of eating shechar. But then the Gemara says, "V'dilma dveila ki'ilit." Maybe it's a case where he ate a dveila ki'ilit, right? So dveila is
A cake of pressed dates.
yeah, it's no, I mean a cake in the sense not a cake like with mizonot. In other words, they used to take the dates and press them into like a round, and that was how they were sold. So
Actually, in America, in Lebanese markets, one can buy dates and figs that way still. But I did buy them sometimes that way.
okay, so what's a dveila ki'ilit? So
Elite is just a place, location.
very good. So
I've done my homework.
I see. So what is that? So what's the point? The Dilma dveila ki'ilit. Maybe it's a dveila ki'ilit. Maybe and what's the proof of the Tanya? We learn in a Braita, achal dveila ki'ilit v'shata dvash v'chalav, right? So if he ate of a dveila ki'ilit, or he drank honey or milk, v'nichnas l'mikdash, and then he went into the mikdash, he's chayav or lokeh, right? There are two girsot here. So the girsa in the round parentheses seems to be the girsa of Rashi, which is usually the favored girsa. Round parentheses means that it's considered to not be a good girsa, and I'm not sure here exactly what the machloket between the girsaot are, because right, nichnas mikdash, either chayav or lokeh. In other words, either way, he's going to be liable for punishment. Midioraita, mishum what? Why is it that you'll be chayav for walking into the mikdash after you've eaten or consumed these things, the dveila ki'ilit, or if you drank honey or milk? What are you chayav for?
You're over the prohibition of entering the mikdash while drunk.
Right. So Rashi quotes the pasuk, Shechar al tesht, right? So it's here, Yain v'shechar al tesht, atau v'necha itach, v'voachem el ohem moed, v'lo tamutu, chukato lamedorotechem. Right, so wine and hard drink do not drink, you and your children with you, when you come to the Ol Moed, and you will not die. Right, meaning that if you do drink, then you'll be chayav. So what is that? So what does it tell me? What's the point here about dveila ki'ilit? To get back to our point.
So this would suggest that shechar, in fact, is something that you possibly could eat, and so therefore it's not necessarily shtia. I mean, so it actually could be assumed under ochel.
Right. So when the Torah says yayin v'shechar, maybe the ribui of shechar is just to include anything that makes you drunk, including things that you eat, and then maybe that's sufficient. In other words, the yayin, what we wanted to gained from bringing the pasuk of Yain v'Shechar that we didn't get from the pasuk of the Tiroshcha, a few psukim earlier, was exactly this word Shechar. We wanted to bring in Shechar as something that you eat, and the assumption is that Shechar is something that you can only really that what the assumption is that Shechar means what? Something that makes you drunk. And that's in contrast to Yain. Maybe Yain makes you drunk, maybe it doesn't make you drunk. But Shechar, by definition, is midi de mishaker. It's something that makes you drunk. And yet, the Torah refers to it using the verb of v'achalta. It's something that you eat. So the implication is that if you eat something that even when you drink shechar, you're eating. It's included under eating, and that's unlike the yayin that I added to the anigron, because there I'm literally eating it, and here I'm saying that no, but in order to get drunk, I need to eat it. I need to drink it, but the Torah still refers to it as eating. So, so the Gemara says that's not a good enough proof, right? Because maybe I can get drunk from eating. So they don't bring the example of rum cake, but they bring the example of the devela ki'ilit, which is definitely a food and not a drink. And yet, if you eat devela ki'ilit, you're not allowed to go into the mikdash, and that proves that it's something that can make you drunk. And so therefore what? Therefore I'm left with the same problem, that even maybe the shechar that's being referred to here is still something that makes you drunk, but maybe it's something that you can eat. So finally I say, Eli alif shechar mi nazir. So rather I'm going to learn shechar from shechar of nazir. Malahalan yain, afkan yain. So just like elsewhere, and there's just like by Nazir, it's talking about wine. The shechar of the Nazir is wine. So here also by Maaser Sheni, it's also talking about wine. So what does that help me? What's the shechar of the Nazir? Let's just take a look. So this is Parshat Nazir. Bamidbar Vav. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta alehem. Isho ishaki yafligu indor neder Nazir lahazir laHashem. Right. So somebody who makes a neder to be a Nazir. Miyayin v'shechar yazir. Chometz yayin v'chometz shechar lo yishteh. V'chol mishrat anavim lo yishteh v'anavim lachim v'yiveshim lo yochel. Right, so it lists the things that somebody who's taken a vow to be a Nazir is not allowed to consume. He has to separate himself from wine and from shechar. So what's our Gemara saying about shechar here?
In this context, it is by definition liquid.
It's liquid.
It's shia. It's there's distinction drawn between what is eaten and what is drunk.
Okay, so if shechar by a Nazir is something that you drink, then I'll say that the word shechar, when it appears elsewhere in Maser Sheni, in the Parsha of Maser Sheni, it's also referring to something that one drinks, right? Eliyalif shechar shechar mi nazir, ma lahalan yain. So just like over there, by nazir, it's a kind of wine. So also here, it's a kind of wine. And it's, as Michael said, it's something that you drink. Rashi says, afkan yain, u'v'yayin ein shichrut ela b'shtiyata. With wine, you don't reach drunkenness except through drinking. So once again, at this moment, what have we proven?
We've proven that at least in one context, shtia and achila are or that we've proven that shtia and achila are separate categories.
Is that what we proved?
No. So we've proven the opposite. Excuse me. We've proven the opposite. So when the word yain or shechar appears, it's so when yain and when I'm getting all muddled here.
That's okay. That's why I'm walking through it. So let's go back and look again at the pasuk in Parshat Nazir. It says, "V'yayin v'shechar yazir chometz yain v'chometz shechar lo yishteh." So here it's very explicit that wine and shechar are things that one drinks. Mishrat anavim lo yishteh. And not only that, anavim lachim v'yiveshim lo yochel. This pasuk clearly differentiates between eating and drinking. So the solid things like soft grapes, soft or dried grapes, one does not eat. All the other things, yain, shechar, chometz yain, chometz shechar, or a mishrat anavim, right? So like you had a like water that was soaked with grapes. Those are all things that one drinks. So shechar here is something that I drink. So Eli Alif shechar shechar mi nazir. So I learned from Nazir shechar that shechar is something that is mishaker. It's also something that I drink, and malahalan yain afkan yain. So the main thing the Gemara wants to learn out from it is that shechar is not anything that makes you drunk, because anything that makes you drunk might include dvela ki'ilit. But here it says yain v'shechar. So yain v'shechar, I understand that shechar is in the same category as yain, and also as a subtext, it's something that I drink. It's something that's mishaker, and it's something that I drink. So malahalan yain, so just like by Nazir, shechar is yain, meaning shechar is in the same category as yain. So here also, by Maser Sheni, where it's referred to as achila, but it's also, shechar is still also kind of yain, meaning it's something that I drink, and thereby, again, proving that shtiya is bichlal achila. So adkan. So this point, I've made a case that when the Torah talks about achila, it can also be talking about shtiyah, and it just needs to say achila. Shtiyah will be included in achila. But now Gemara pushes back on something we started with. It was tirosh, right? The first pasuk was about tirosh. So the Gemara says, "V'tirosh chamrahu." Is tirosh wine? V'hatanya hanoder min hatirosh asur b'chol minei metika umutar beyayin. We learn a braita regarding nidarim. If somebody is noder min hatirosh, somebody makes a neder that, and he says, I make a neder that I'm not going to have any tirosh. So then, once he uses that language of tirosh, he says, I'm not going to have any tirosh, he is now forbidden to consume any kind of sweet. Or more specifically, as Rashi says, Asur b'chol minei metika b'ferot chadashim b'tapuchim b'anavim. It refers to new fruits, like apples or grapes. So if you make a neder not to have tirosh, it means you're not allowed to have fresh fruits. Umutar b'yayin, but actually you would be permitted to drink wine. Mutar b'yayin, you're allowed to have wine. Rashi says umutar b'yayin ben arba'im. That's 40 old. That is, there's the Gemara says elsewhere, there's a concept of yayin migito, yayin that comes from the gat, that comes from the wine press. That is, so when you make wine, so you bring the grapes to the wine press and you press out the juice. So the juice that you press out, that's called, in Gemara's terms, that's yayin migito. And up to 40 days, it's not considered to be wine for the purposes of bringing it as libation, right, as a nisuch on the mizbeach. The underlying assumption is that it needs 40 days to ferment. Okay, so here, Asur b'chol minei metika, if you said, I forbid myself, taking upon myself as a neder not to have any tirosh, then you're not allowed to have fresh fruits, but you would be allowed to have wine. And Rashi just explains wine, meaning it would have to be fermented wine. In other words, so it's exactly the opposite of what you would think. Until now, we thought tirosh meant wine. And here, now, according to this braita, it's the opposite. It excludes wine. It includes fresh fruits, but it excludes wine. So it would include grape juice, unfermented wine, but once it becomes wine, then it's no longer tirosh. So that's the implication of this braita. So it turns on its head what we thought tirosh meant. We thought tirosh meant wine, and now I see that it doesn't mean wine. It means fresh fruits, and dafka not wine. So then the Gemara pushes back on. So without answering that question right away, the Gemara pushes back and says, "V'lav chamrahu." And what you're telling me that tirosh is not wine? That's what you want to learn? V'haktiv, but I have a pasuk that says v'tirosh yinovev betulot. That tirosh will be minovev betulot. We'll look at that pasuk in a moment. Davar haba min hatirosh. So the Gemara answers davar haba min hatirosh yinovev betulot. So what's tirosh yinovev betulot? So this is a pasuk in Zechariah. the end of chapter 9. Second. So I'm not going to go through the psukim in Zechariah. This is it's a little bit too much off of our agenda here, but this is the last pasuk as part of a nevuah of Zechariah. He says, "Kimat tovu ma yafyo, dagan bachurim, v'tirosh yinovev betulot." So the here, how great is its goodness and how great is its beauty. Grain, dagan, will make the young men flourish. Dagan bachurim. The translation here is translating vev from the word like hanava, like when you make like flowering, hanava. They're translating this in the sense of flourish. Grain will make young men flourish, and new wine the virgins. New wine, the tirosh, will be vev betulot. So what does that have to do with anything? How's the Gemara understanding this? So Rashi here explains tirosh yinovev betulot ze yayin tov shehu mishaker ta'adam. This is good wine that makes a person drunk. Legalot sitrei libo, that then makes him reveal the secrets of his heart, ha'atumim, that are opaque, that are hidden, like the betula. It was just like the right. So it's metaphorical language, or allegorical type language. So tirosh yinovev betulot. So the way the Gemara understands this pasuk, the yinovev is the idea of like making that wine, by virtue of the fact that it makes one drunk, is minovev betulot. It reveals the secrets, like the way a betula is hidden, it would make her exposed. All that to say, I see from this pasuk that tirosh is dafka wine. That's the main point. In other words, this is a proof text to show me that tirosh means wine dafka, right? So how do I square that with the fact that a moment ago I said if you're noder mina tirosh, you're mutar beyayin. The tirosh does not include wine, and here I see in the pasuk that tirosh is dafka wine. So the Gemara answers, davar haba min hatirosh yinoveh betula. That which comes from tirosh is yinoveh betula. What does it mean, that which comes from tirosh?
Wine. Wine is derived from tirosh.
Right. So what's tirosh according to the Braita?
The immature grape juice.
It could be immature grape juice, or it could be, right? So it could be the grapes themselves. It could be fresh fruit, or it could be yain migito, the right wine that has not yet been fermented. So that which comes from the fruit, that will become wine, and that's what's minovev betulot. Right? Rashi says, "Abba min hatirosh min ha'anavim," that which comes from the grapes. V'hachikam akra. This is how to read the pasuk. Ha'anavim yotzim lachem, yotziu lachem davar asher yinoveh betulot. The grapes, the tirosh, which are the grapes, they will produce for you something which is minoveh betulot. So, once again, I haven't shown that tirosh is wine. Dafka, I could understand that tirosh is dafka not wine. Maybe it just means grapes, or maybe it means any kind of fresh fruit. So Gemara then says, "Aktiva tirosh kabecha yiprotzu," that the tirosh of your yikavim, of your wine making places, will be broken down. So what's that? Rashi here explains Tiroshi Kabecha Yifrotzu B'chol Yekev Shebemikra Hu Habor Shelifnei Hagat. So what's the Yekev? In other words, now we use it generally. A Yekev is like a winery, but it means something specific in Tanakh. It's the pit that was in front of the wine press. B'sham ein hanavim netunim. That's not where you put the grapes. That's where you put the wine. That's where the wine goes once the wine is pressed out from the gat. So the pasuk says, "V'tirosh yikavecha," the tirosh of your yikavim, the tirosh of your wine pits, will be broken down. So I understand from this pasuk, tirosh must be wine itself and not the grapes. But nonetheless, the Gemara pushes back. It says, "Davar haba min hatirosh yikavecha yifrotzu." Right. So once again, it doesn't necessarily mean the wine. It could be that which comes from the tirosh into the yeket. Rashi says, "Davar haba mitirosh v'hachi kamakra." Anavim hiyu lecha hamafritzim yikavecha b'yayin. That the grapes will be for you that which break into or break down your wine pits. Ulolam ein hayayin nikra tirosh ela ha'anavim. And I could still argue that tirosh refers to the grapes and not to the wine. So then I'll bring another pasuk. L'haktiv znut v'yayin v'tirosh yikach lev. I have a pasuk in Mishlei. It says that znut. In Hosea, that znut and wine and tirosh will take the heart. And so, what does it mean? Take the heart? Presumably that when you drink wine, it will take your heart. In other words, you'll get drunk, and it'll take you over. Rashi says, "V'aktiv yain v'tirosh yikach lev v'achilat anavim einam meshakeret." Simply eating grapes doesn't make one shikor, doesn't make one drunk. Ella. So what do I see from all this? It seems like from the other psukim of tirosh, I don't have a hard, fast proof that tirosh means wine, because I could always say it means something that comes from grapes, that it's the tirosh means grapes, and the things that's mishaker is that which comes from the grapes, which is the wine, but not the tirosh itself. But here it's hard to get around, because here it says nud v'yayin v'tirosh yikach lev, that the tirosh itself is that which is lokeach lev. So how do I square this? If that's true, if tirosh is wine, then how do I understand that braita that said that hanoder min hatirosh asur b'chol minei mitzika umutar b'yayin? How do I understand then that tirosh can dafka not be wine? It has to dafka not be wine in order for that braita to make sense. So the Gemara says, "Ela dekulei alma tirosh chamrahu." The Gemara says, no, actually, everyone agrees. Tirosh does mean wine. Uvinidarim, but when you're talking about neder, halach achar lashon b'nei adam. You go after the way people speak. And so what does it mean? At the time of the Mishnah, people in their everyday usage use the word tirosh to refer to fresh fruits. In other words, language changes, right? So in the time of when it says Kule Alma Tirosh Chamrahu, what it means is actually that was like Lashon Mikra. In Lashon Mikra, Tirosh does mean wine. But by the time we get to Tkufat Mishnah, that's not the way people use the term Tirosh. So let's say, to bring from an example, like a modern example, right? If you say Tirosh now in Israel, in modern Hebrew, it could be referring to wine, but it would be like a very poetic language. It's not the language that you would use in everyday speech. If you did use it in everyday speech, it's just as likely that you're referring to the brand name of grape juice, which is very popular, right? Tavi tirosh, if you told somebody to bring tirosh, they'd probably bring you tirosh grape juice, right? So that doesn't tell me anything about what tirosh means in Tanakh. It just tells me what tirosh means now. So tirosh in Tkufat Mishnah meant fresh fruits. That's what it meant. So when you're noder to not eat tirosh, that's what it means. You're not allowed to have fresh fruit or grape juice. But you would be allowed to have wine because nobody used tirosh to refer to wine. And that's what the Gemara is saying. Ela dekule ama tirosh chamrahu u'v'nedarim halach achar l'shon b'nei adam. Right. So if you avoid nedarim, you understand this. It's one of the chalim of neder. Neder is something that is determined. The efficacy or the chalut of the neder is determined by the way people normally use language. When somebody says X, what is the assumption of what he's talking about, he or she are talking about? So then the Gemara says, right, so Rashi says, tirosh. It wasn't their way to call wine tirosh, just like it's not our way. That was a Lashon Tanakh, but it wasn't Lashon in Bayit Sheni. The Kach Mutar B'Yayin. That's why somebody who said that they're noder min tirosh, they're allowed to drink wine, and that's what that means. V'mai kari le tirosh, v'mai kari le yain, v'mai kari le tirosh. So then why is it that sometimes it's called wine and sometimes it's called tirosh? So this is sort of like, it's like now that we're talking about tirosh and yain, what are the diukim? Like, what can we say about them? Why do I use the term tirosh? Why does Tanakh use the word tirosh, and why does it use the term yain? So yain shemevi yilala la'olam. Yain is used because it brings yilala, like crying out into the world. Tirosh shekol hamitgarebo na'aseh rash. And what's tirosh? Tirosh is anybody who is mitgarebo, that is, we would say challenging it, but like if you get mixed up with, if you are in a confrontation with tirosh, you will become a rash. You'll become a poor person. In other words, Chazal here are darshaning the words yayin and tirosh. The Gemara goes on about this a little bit more, and we're gonna, even though this would bring us to the end of this part of the Gemara, we're gonna pick up on this next time, partly because, or let's say mainly because I'm still a little bit sick and I want to stop. So This latter part here is just to understand in a sort of midrashic way what yayin and tirosh are, and that's also the next part of the Gemara where Rav Kahana. And then after that, we'll talk about the Mekorot for Rechitza and Sicha and so forth. But this is where we'll stop for now. Okay, anyway, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Good afternoon and refuah shlema.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
בריאות טובה, רפואה שלמה.
תודה.
תודה.
להתראות.
Bye bye. Shabbat
Bye-bye.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom.